Yeah, recording.
Hey,
Awesome. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Matt, also known as Miggins, and this is my channel, Hobbit Books. As you can see, I've got a cool new background, and I've got a special friend to share with you today. I've got my very first interview with the author Troy Knowlton, who wrote this fabulous book, Seekers. Oh, you can't see it in the background. Seekers,
fading into
the
the
Winds of
background.
Change.
Yes.
Welcome, Joy.
Well,
How
thank
are
you for
you?
having me. I appreciate it. I don't know what possessed you to choose me as your first interview, but I'm happy at your madness. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. No, I've read your book and I absolutely loved it. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but I might have told you this before, but there's a bit of a funny story of like I guess almost like fate in a way how I read your book, but I'm sure we'll get into that later.
Mhm.
So maybe just give yourself a brief introduction, who you are, and yeah, just a bit about yourself.
Alrighty. Well, my name's Troy Knowlton. Southern California native, born and raised there. Grew up in a town called Highland, California. It's in just the southern part of California, just east of LA. I don't think I told you this yet, Matt, but I went to Catholic school my entire,
Oh wow.
I guess, scholastic life before college. From kindergarten all the way to being a senior. So that was kind of interesting. It was kind of a different dynamic, and I had a lot of
Yeah.
friends that went to public school and stuff like that. But yeah, the Catholic school was just as a, it was an experience, yeah.
I bet you
And
got some tales.
oh yes, definitely. Oh, if we get into it, I have teachers and stuff like that. We'll share. But yeah, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do during those years. Like in high school, but towards the tail end. I guess I'll tell you about my parents. My dad, he worked as a title officer, which is basically just managed land, transfers of title between stuff
Okay.
like that. And then my mom, she actually worked for a drugstore chain called Long's Drugstore. It was a small chain around here, and it ended up getting bought out by CVS. Well, before that happened,
Oh.
she injured herself, so she was out on leave for a while. And then after she came back, she kind of realized that she didn't want to do that anymore. And so she ended up getting a job in human resources at San Bernardino County. San Bernardino is like one of the cities just right next to Highland, and it's the largest county actually in Southern California. So
Wow.
she wanted to go for a county job and ended up getting an HR position at Arrowhead Regional Medical Center, which is in another town just on the other side of San Bernardino called Colton. And spoiler alert, that's where I work now. But she put the idea into my head as far as, hey, why don't you become an X-ray tech? And so that was kind
School.
of the plan, like towards the tail end of my high school years. And then I graduated high school. I went to community college over at Crafton Hills in Ukaipa, which is just another little small town, sort of further inland. And I went there. I got all the prerequisites. I got my Associate of Sciences actually while I was there. And then I applied for the program. It took me 3 times to get into the X-ray
Oh.
program because I don't know, it's really really competitive program. So to give you an idea, it's shrunk a little bit with the number of applicants. But when I first applied, I think the first year they take 8 students and a couple of
Oh wow.
alternates. Yeah, only eight, and they usually get around like anywhere from 60 to 80 applicants. It's
Oh
tapered off
boy.
now. So sometimes it's closer to the 60 end now, but before, like when I first applied, it was I think at least 80. So it was a lot of
Wow.
applicants. So the first time I did not get in. So luckily, I had my prerequisites done the first time, but I didn't have my degree yet. So I just stayed. I was working part time at the time over at. It was a retail store. It was called Big Five Sporting Goods in San Bernardino, and that's
Okay.
it's basically just a sporting goods store. I've learned a lot about a lot of different sports while I was there. I played football in high school, so
Oh
not the
cool.
not the kicking one,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the
The well, I
American
guess we
football.
call it
Yeah,
like rugby.
yeah.
Similar.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I should have said American football because for 90% of the world, football is with a soccer ball. Well, what we call soccer, but yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I worked there actually for 3 years, pretty much during my time in college, and I applied 2 more times to get into the X-ray program. On the third time, I got in. Third time was the charm. And there's a funny story about that. So I know the program director. She wasn't the director at the time, but she was on the interview panel. And I asked her because I felt like each time I interviewed almost the same. So I'm like,
yeah.
What did I do differently that time? And she said, I don't know. You just seem more mature. And you know what the difference was, Matt? I had a beard that time. That's the only discernible difference that
you came in as Gandalf.
Yeah. So I got in, and it's a 2-year program. You're basically 40 hours a week plus classes. So it's pretty intense program. Yeah. Did that. The clinical site is on site there at Arrowhead. It's a level 2 trauma center, meaning that they get a lot of crazy stuff. And I think we talked a little bit before about all the
I had a few stories.
Broken bones, burns. Like they just some people come in and they're like 80% burned, their whole body just charred. It's pretty gruesome stuff. Yeah. And then just a lot of car accidents and stuff. Yeah. So you get to see it all, and you have to learn how to take X-rays on these people, because whenever they come in to the trauma bay, if we're just talking about that specifically, they'll need usually a chest X-ray to assess their heart and lungs and stuff like that, because that's where they could take a turn for the worst. The quickest, but enough of that macabre stuff.
Got enough of it in your book. No.
Yeah, exactly, right. So I'm basically did my schooling there, and then on the tail end of my schooling, they always try to hire from the X-ray school there, just because they have a familiarity with the students, having known them for 2 years. So I got to be good friends with the day lead tech there, and she does a lot of the hiring. So I ended up getting a job there. Been working there ever since for about 6, almost 7 years now. I think I got hired in 2017. My math's right.
5 years ago.
5 years. 5 years. Yes, I'm.
I can't be 6 years.
Math. It feels like 6 years. So I guess 7 years I've been there altogether, and then 5 years I've been an X-ray tech there. Yeah, and so just this last year, starting last fall. A little bit before that, in the summer, I was approached by the program director and the clinical coordinator at Arrowhead School to basically to see if I wanted to teach a class there. So I'm also been teaching class there for this last year, X-ray physics, which sounds intimidating, but it's really actually rather simple.
It sounds really brainy.
No, it's not that bad, and I try to make it fun. But before I even started teaching there, and then whilst I was teaching there too, is when I wrote Seekers. And I had always had the idea of wanting to tell a story. Spoiler alert, I'm not very well read, Matthew. I started my love for storytelling with film, and just with that kind of dynamic. And so I love movies. I've seen a lot of movies.
Me too.
My friends will say that I have not, just because I haven't seen the movies that they want me to have seen. But I have seen quite a few movies, especially I know that you are just starting to get into anime. If you ever need any recommendations, characters or just good times, you just let me know. I'll absolutely I'll fill you in. And so I started with just liking film and just wanting to kind of contribute in some way like that, because I love the way that those stories make me feel. You get that kind of catharsis, or just I don't know what it is. It's just, it touches you, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
And so I knew I was never going to be a director, because it all seems like you need to know somebody for that. So that dream died rather quickly. But I thought, there was just this thing in the back of my head, well, how can I tell a story? And it didn't come to me all at once, but I'm like, I could try to write it down. I'm like, I know nothing about writing, but I could try to write it down. And so I had read a little bit, like I was telling you, I really loved The Hobbit. That was my first major book that I just churned through. And I'd read, a little bit here and there. I really enjoyed during high school, all of those required reading books, like 1984 and,
I need to get to that.
1984, Fahrenheit 451. What are some other great ones? Oh, there's just a bunch. I have them at my bookshelf at home, but since I moved to the apartment, I haven't had a lot of books over here yet. But that's going to change. I'm in a readathon right now that's going to be starting in July. I know that George reads books, hit you up
Oh,
about
is
that
it
one.
the India
India
chords? Is
chords,
it? Yeah,
yes.
yeah. He's trying to get me in on that one.
I know. Yeah. But so to I guess get back to it. So I just always had that in the back of my mind, right? That I wanted to tell the story. And the story was kind of like like I'm a very like serial daydreamer. I will daydream often, like on drives before, when like my parents would drive me around, and then after I got my own car, driving around anywhere. My fiance lives really far away, so like driving an hour and a half, just thinking about like
Wow.
story possibilities, what could happen and stuff like that. And this kind of developed out of that in a sense. And I was still terrified because I had no experience writing, very little experience reading, and I didn't really even know where to start. But I started on YouTube, funnily enough, and just like watching different videos on like plots, and just kind of learning, like, I guess the skeleton,
Yeah.
the really basics of writing and telling stories and stuff like that. And I applied that to kind of what I was envisioning, and it just started to kind of form itself in my mind. And then funnily enough, again, the whole idea for the world of Tiarna, as it appears on the book, and just everywhere else, and even in that I sent you the computer one, right? The colored map.
Oh, I think so. Yeah, I think I got it somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, that I made on my computer, but I didn't do it for the purposes of writing a book initially. I did it because me and my friends were going to play Dungeons and Dragons, and I was tasked with being
Oh,
the dungeon master. And so I don't. I am one that likes to create my own stuff. So when they were saying, "Oh yeah, we can run, this module or this from this, established world or lore or whatever," I'm like, I want to do it myself. So I built a world, just like that.
yeah.
I can't claim that it's super, super deep, but I like to think that I given it a lot of thought, and just a lot of time, like ruminating over where those locations might be, and who might live there and stuff like that. So I've had a lot of fun making Tiarna, the world, but it was all
Yeah.
for a Dungeons and Dragons game. And when that kind of fell through, I'm like, well, like, let me finally write this book. Like, let me finally, like, just take a crack at it, do something to try and like get pen to paper, proverbially.
Yeah.
So I started, like, I think it was, gosh, I think 2018, 2019. I started
Okay.
just trying to write stuff down, and I had no idea what I was doing. It was a complete and utter mess. I got about 7 chapters in. I think I got to it was formed differently before. Like, I didn't go Tyrus Orin. It was Tyrus Orin. Like, it was a
Oh,
mess.
wow.
I think I stopped with the chapter No Feelings, where they go to the prison.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I was halfway through that, and then that was where it stayed for about a year,
Oh,
and I didn't make any advances on that at all. But I don't know. I don't remember if it was the pandemic that changed it, that I just had more time, like I wasn't going out and doing something. But I definitely picked it up a lot more during the pandemic. And like, fate is funny. I was talking to one of my coworkers, a traveler tech, and his sister had a master's degree in creative writing, and was very much
uh,
willing to help me. So I got to talking with her. She looked at my manuscript, probably vomited a little bit, and then told me how to fix it. And so, yeah, no, it was bad, Matthew. I wasn't. I was
oh, man, I
using.
want to read it now.
Oh, that doesn't exist anymore. I burned it with
Oh.
fire. uh, but I was using quotations for like thoughts, and she's like, "Well, you probably want to italicize those so they differentiate them from dialogue, and you really should do a different paragraph when you have a different speaker." And I'm like, "Oh yes, okay." Like, as if these very basic things I just didn't know. This is really funny. So after basically slamming my head against the wall enough times, I eventually got to something that looks like fairly, like maybe third grade level prose. And so I was able to kind of construct a manuscript. But even with doing that, I was writing as she was giving me these tips. And I feel like I rewrote the first 7 chapters probably 3 times at least, just
Wow.
to something that resembles, what a novel might look like. And so after I was done writing the whole thing for the first time, I sent it off to her because she was also, as it turns out, a freelance editor. So,
Oh,
yeah,
what a coincidence that
right?
is.
It
That's
just sort of worked
crazy.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she was great. So she sent me back with like it was thousands of edits probably. She warned me ahead of time. She's like, I'm a very tough editor, and I'm like, perfect, good. Tear it to shreds. I want to make it as good as it can be. And
Yeah.
so she did, and I did, and it took a while and a lot of rewrites, and then even kind of changing a couple of the ways the story was told. Like I was saying, I used to have not a change of POV for every chapter. It used to be like 3 chapters for one POV and then changing over. So I was really happy with it after we restructured it to where it's one POV, other POV, because I just felt like the story flowed better that way. So
Yeah.
really happy about that. And then after that was done, I sent it off to a couple of proofreaders. One was a specific proofreader. One was more of a beta read, just to make sure that structurally, like, everything was good, that the narrative flowed. And they sent it back to me with some recommendations, just very minor ones. Like, structurally, it was really good, but, I just had to polish it a little bit and, change words here. And so I did that. And then some version of that is what you got to read.
Well, it's certainly a really enjoyable book to read. Yeah, I really enjoyed. I mean, if you like your world building where it's not massively dense and in the forefront, this is going to be one for you. I mean, the map, I've shown it on Twitter. It's just I'll show it again on here. You can't see it. I should have planned this out better. It's a beautiful map. I'll put it a link to a tweet with it under in the video description. But I was really kind of enamored with this world, and especially with the prologue. I mean, it just completely hit me. I had no idea what to expect. So, I mean, I mentioned that funny story earlier that of how I discovered this book was essentially. I hope you don't take offense at this, by the way.
No.
But so essentially, I if you know the first binding by R.R. Verdi is coming out this year. It's one of my most anticipated books of the year, and in the end, I did finally manage to get hold of a copy because I became a reviewer for Fantasy Book Critic online. But before that, I was trying to make it on my own, and you can use what they call NetGalley, which Troy had put up, and I was just searching through the ones to get my ratio up, and I thought, well, this one looks interesting because there's lots of them that you can either request them or they're free to read, and Troy had put his up free to read, and I thought, well, this one looks interesting compared to the others. This one looks like a book I'd actually want to read, and so I picked it up just because I wanted to get my feedback ratio up, not really sure what to expect and what quality to expect. But I thought it's a short book as well. I mean, it's shortish for me. It's a short book, so I thought, well, I can read this, and normally they recommend reading a couple of sort of books for children, like pop-up books and things you can read online. So I thought, I'll read this one so I can see I've read a proper book, and then read a children's book as well. And I absolutely was just enthralled by it. And I really liked something that I don't often see in fantasy a lot, actually. I mean, maybe I haven't read widely enough, but there was a lot of humor in this book. Oh, yeah, so it's going to run in 10 minutes. That's fine. We'll have to carry on. Yeah, there was a lot of, I mean, even sort of in the first few chapters, I like to say it's a very British kind of humor. It's a very kind of dry wit, very sort of banterish at times. And I really enjoyed that aspect. And, it was described as, I think it's put up as YA. And actually, I didn't think it was, I thought it was kind of like borderline. There's moments where it's, gets really emotional. It gets kind of dark. And there were moments.
Say that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. What were you saying?
Oh, I was just going to say there were moments, I'm kind of read it with my hand between my fingers. There's some creatures in there that, I mean, I think you'll know which bit I'm on about, but it really kind of like creeped me out.
Creeped me out too, writing about it. Yeah. Gosh, how do I write this in the worst way possible?
Well, you suddenly did that. And I really appreciated it as like this blend. It wasn't entirely grim and dark and gritty. There's a bit of lightness, a bit of humor. Yeah, how did you kind of go about that with pulling all these elements together but keeping it cohesive and not kind of feeling like it's changing like tones, really like almost like tonal whiplash.
So it's funny that you say that. As far as the YA comment, I wrote this not thinking it would be a YA book. With like I said, I had no preconceived notions of like genre. Like I had a feel for it, but not a really, I guess, educated feel for it. And so I just wrote what I kind of wanted to read, if that makes sense. I know that's kind of selfish and somewhat pretentious to say, but that's just what I wanted to do. Yeah. So,
yeah, it makes for a good book.
And I feel like a lot of the themes of what I want to read in terms of just the kind of character growth that happens, that kind of, dealing with change and kind of learning, how to just deal with, like things that are changing your own personal life, like in the world and stuff like that. Like that's a very more YA kind of thing, but at least that's what it's characterized as. But I feel like everybody, no matter the age, they go through changes through their life. I think it's just more, I guess, pronounced like during those formative years, when you're just becoming a teenager, you have hormones, and then you're graduating high school, going into college, and that whole thing. So I think that just because it's more pronounced at that time, that those sort of stories are classified as YA, because that resonates with those age groups really good. But I feel like it could resonate with older people. It certainly does with me. And so that's kind of the basis of what I wanted to write. And initially, this is another funny story, the person I was telling you about that edited my book, I initially had the character ages a little bit later in age. So Tyrus originally was 24.
Okay.
Yes, but she told me, she's like, well, he really reads like he's a little bit younger, especially with, the potential romance that develops, just with characters and stuff like that. So she was saying that it seemed like there were more teens. And, when I thought about it and I really didn't want to change it. We don't want to kill our darlings or change. And I thought about it, and I'm like, you know what? It's going to change the narrative. I had to edit a couple of things. Tyrus and Squall initially knew each other a little bit longer because he was a little bit older, but I just backed up the ages, and it still worked and still flowed. So it's really funny that you say that. And you're not the first to say, or the only one I should say, to say that it reads kind of in between a YA and an adult. And, like I remember there was a genre for a while, although I haven't seen it recently, it's called New Adult, and it was kind of a bridging the gap between those. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I've not heard of that. It rings a bell, but
genre. It was basically to kind of fill in that gap between YA and adult. And maybe this is more of a new adult book, although I'm still going to say that it's a YA because a lot of the themes in it are definitely YA-ish to me. But there's a lot of adult themes in there, and trying to balance all of that has been a nightmare. But I've been trying to, like with each chapter, I guess I wrote an outline first of just what I wanted the story to be for this book. I actually, in the planning stages, just thinking about it, like when I was telling you, doing all that daydreaming, I daydreamed the entire story to its conclusion. I'm planning it to be a 4-book series. Okay. So I knew the beginning, I knew some parts of the middle, and I knew some parts of the end. But when I went to go tackle it for the first book here, I needed to have a beginning, middle, and end for that. So I ended up outlining that before I did much of any writing, and then kind of stuck to that outline. And as I was going, and just as like, I guess, time went on, I kept adding to it and just finding, new ideas that I really like to explore, like, the secret alley and the gray trenches. I didn't have those in my mind initially. And so I had to kind of just, like think about it a little bit more. But I approach each chapter like with an idea of, wanting to create conflict, have a little bit of levity in there, and just, kind of have a nice tidy conclusion, although leave you on a cliffhanger at least quite a few times. And so I kind of really just wanted to not like check all those boxes off, but sort of think about formulating those chapters in that way. And so that's kind of how each chapter took shape. And the humor is just, I kind of put myself in the place of the characters and what I felt like they might talk to each other. And, nobody talks to each other always in a serious tone, right?
Yeah.
Everybody likes to joke around, especially if you're good friends, you love to, push buttons. And so banter in the early chapters, that's what I really wanted to kind of drive home, just to make it feel a little more homely, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, and that definitely kind of shone through in the book. And you know, it always left me wanting to read more and read more. And I can't remember how quickly I went through it, but it must have been, um, if you count the time that I was actually reading it in terms of days, probably a couple of weeks. Um, you know, it's a completely gripping book, and I really, you know, connected to a lot of these characters and had a lot of emotions towards the end. You know, it does. There's a bit of heartbreak in here, but it was also one of the really most incredible love stories I've read that brews in this, and also really kind of heartbreaking. I mean, no spoilers, but there's kind of a heartbreaking what could have been love story with a
Yes.
certain character that
Mhm.
that they were one of my favorite characters, and they were a very lovable character, and I thought it was a really good depiction of a character with some diversity to them. How did that come about? How did you form that character? Was that always kind of in mind, or?
I think I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yes. So that character initially came to mind. It wasn't in the initial like thought process of the novel, but I'm trying to word this so they don't spoil anything.
Yeah.
That character was always conjoined with the other character in terms of
Okay.
just always being around there to protect them, to be like just their, kind of not side character in any sense, but just
Yeah.
it would make sense that if you had a character in the position that this character was in, that they would need protection, or that they would, at least have some sort of protection. And so that's what this character initially started off as. But then, I thought about it for a while and I'm like, well, that just seems rather bland, right? So let's give this
Yeah.
other person some character. So I really wanted to think about it, and I wanted to think about what maybe hadn't been done, at least to my knowledge, and I
Mm.
very, very limited knowledge, but I want to think of some like dynamic, like relationship dynamic that maybe just hadn't been explored quite that deeply. And I don't say that I explore it super deeply, but I at least
Yeah.
wanted to have it there, just to, have it as, something that was maybe just a little bit different and, just refreshing. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed writing that. And I, obviously don't know if I'm the best person to, really delve deep into that, but I
Yeah.
wanted to at least acknowledge it's sort of a tip of the hat if you, get that analogy.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, and so I really wanted to have that there. And then the ultimate conclusion of that character's arc was just more of a, I don't know, like, how do I say this without spoiling it?
It's tricky, isn't it?
You know what I'm talking about,
Yeah,
right?
I think so. Yeah, I'm trying to recall. I think I remember at the end now. I've read so many books, it
Oh,
starts
I
to get.
know. Yeah, you have to keep so many books straight. I can't even
Yeah.
imagine. Yeah, but yeah, so the end of that character's arc was certainly something that I gave a lot of thought to and wanted to, represent well. And so I hope that I did. And yeah, it's just trying to plot out where all of these characters go. I don't want any of them to end in the same spot where they began, because, then what's the point of, having them go through this journey and, the growth that they go on. I mean, the novel's called Winds of Change, right? It's not called Winds of
Yeah.
Stagnation. So they need to kind of change in some way, and, not for the sake of change, but just because they would, in terms of like all the stuff that they've gone through.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really well done. I think that lots of people that read it, in particular, I guess young people that might be just kind of in that sort of age range where they're starting to question things and figuring out who they are and their identity, that would be really important to them. And
Yeah.
I think that it didn't kind of feel gratuitous or anything. It really kind of felt part of the story, and that really, probably for me, I think was the most heartfelt moments, some of the most tender moments.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked that you're really good at, in particular, kind of at times taking a step back and letting those scenes pass and those emotional scenes, and not just kind of like rushing on to the next action sequence, which, if you know me, you'll know is one of my pet peeves in fantasy. Is like when I'm sort of wishing an author on, I'm willing them on, keep going, just keep pushing, because you're so close to like making me really, really care or cry, and I just want a little bit more. And you're one of the few authors that I've read recently that really kind of leaned into that, and so that was really one of the big pluses for me. So I really enjoyed that, and I'm really excited to see where all the characters go in the next 3 books, I guess. I've got no idea where that's going to end up, not least because I've probably forgotten the ending by now with so many books to remember. But I remember it's nice to feel that it was a complete story. And like you say, it's called The Winds of Change. It's the characters went on a journey. And it was certainly an adventure, and one of the things that I really liked about it as well is it feels kind of like it's like I can sort of see there's a lot of books coming out at the moment that it seems like there's a hunger for more sort of adventure in fantasy and more sort of an Indiana Jones-esque feel. There's lots of kind of like books coming out about, I don't know, like sky pirates and stuff, and
I noticed that too.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what it is, that I guess maybe the pandemic has kind of had people longing for that kind of escapism within escapist world. And I guess with the rise of things like Critical Role and things, people are trying to harken back to that Dungeons and Dragons feel, and I really enjoyed that. And so was it, when you were plotting it out, did you ever like get stuck, or was it easy to kind of work things out and work out all the kind of the connections to how it's all going to fit together in the end? Or
so I'm still working out some parts of book 2 and book 3 just to finish into book 4, because I know how book 4 is going to end. If we're talking just about Winds of Change, I kind of outlined it in one afternoon with a bottle of wine and just my thoughts.
I should try that.
Yeah, there was a lot of wine involved with the writing. I promise
as
I'm
all
not
good authors do.
Like, it's just something about like having a little sip of wine and then typing out 1,000 words or so. It's nice.
Yeah. Well, Crystal Matai's another independent author. She's one famous for her whiskey love. So you got good company there.
Alrighty, yeah. Spirits and stories. I like it. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't hard to. I don't know. Like it just came to me as far as like the outline, like just a classical journey. And it's funny that you mentioned Indiana Jones, because when I initially was pitching it to people, just to talk to people about it, they're like, "Well, what's the story about?" And I'm like, "Well, it's kind of like Indiana Jones, but fantasy, but not quite just Indiana Jones, because different stuff happens." I don't know, but I definitely the Indiana Jones kind of like artifacty elements, because when I was first thinking about it, I wanted to, kind of formulate my main characters, and I'm like, well, they need something to do, and I don't want them to just be warriors, because that's been done to death, and I don't want them to just wizards or anything like that, because I don't want to just borrow from other people or step on anyone's toes. And I'm sure this has been done to death too, but I really loved the fact of Indiana Jones collecting these ancient artifacts. There was a certain kind of mystery involved with it, and like that kind of heightened the adventure for me, just the kind of, I guess, adrenaline. And so even though there's not a whole lot of artifact hunting in that vein in the book, we have our MacGuffin and everything without going into too much detail, but I did want to kind of capture some of that, just in a sense, that kind of mysterious and just joy of like adventuring around. Like I love, stories that have that kind of, journey-esque like adventure.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of where I wanted to go with it. Yeah,
no, I'm a massive fan of those kind of stories. I'm actually working on a little something myself right now. That, I mean, I can't say too much, but it's an audio drama that I'm working with these guys from America. We're gonna kind of do this kind of Epic of Gilgamesh kind of like adventure tale, and it's been really exciting to work on that as a creative outlet, because like yourself, you're saying that you're into film and stuff, and I used to really want to be a filmmaker. I mean, inside I still really do, and I took media studies at what we call A level, which is where it's like the last couple of years of school basically.
Mhm.
And I really enjoyed it the first year, and then but I still didn't. It's the kind of thing where you kind of needed to know before you got there. You needed to have some kind of skill to really do well, and I enjoyed kind of coming up with the story and deciding the shots and stuff. But I wasn't. It kind of came with a prerequisite that you already knew how to do fancy stuff with the cameras and stuff, and if you didn't
Mhm.
know, then it's kind of up to you to figure it out. And I didn't do that, but this is kind of my creative outlet. That is something I've had in mind for a few years, and reading your book, it actually gave me those really big Indiana Jones vibes, which I really like,
Uh-huh.
and right at the cutting edge of fantasy, I guess, with this new trend.
Not even on purpose at all.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I've seen a few. I mean, one of the trends, like I say, is this adventure trend, and then the other one that I've seen is people want. We've had grimdark for about, I guess, going on 15 years now. That's kind of been a real at the forefront of fantasy,
Mhm.
and people, I think, are kind of wanting something a little bit different, a little bit more heart to their books. So it's interesting to see that. I guess what I've heard described as grim heart, where it's like grim
Mhm.
dark, but it's like not entirely like just dark and nihilistic. It's got a little bit of hope in there, which
Yeah.
I think is really interesting. That this is where the direction that a lot of fantasy seems to be heading. So I was going to ask, what's your favorite, but also the worst thing about modern fantasy that you're liking? Where do you see where it's going?
In my very, very limited experience, I really like all of the. I guess I just am seeing now like more of a variety. Like I was telling you on Twitter that I just recently finished We Hunt the Flame by
Oh,
Hafsa Faisal. I'm
yes.
hoping I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Yes, but I really enjoyed that because I really like kind of turned me on to just Middle Eastern culture, and I believe Arabian culture, like in general. I could be misrepresenting. I don't know, but I do know that there's just a lot of those terms that she throws in there that I had to look up, in terms of clothing and food and stuff like that. And just being able to like kind of experience that was really cool because I hadn't seen that before. And
Yeah.
it was really, really refreshing to see, and to see like where she went with the story, and just a similar vein. It came out a couple of years ago, but it has that same kind of feel that you were talking about, where it's like a grand adventure. And so that was just an enjoyable treat. And stuff like that just seems really interesting. Like you were saying, it's going more adventure, which I'm all for. I love that. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm a fan of dark stuff too. I hope to goodness I'm on the India Chords Discord. I hope that they get my Warhammer 40K references because I feel like no one is.
My friends were into that. It's
Yeah.
odd. It's like it's
Mhm.
it's one of the things that I should have been into that and Dungeons and Dragons, but I kind of missed that step. I wasn't friends with. So when my friends were into it, I was about 18. They were about 16, 17. Because I was in the what I call the stage crew. Um, in my school where we were basically running all the tech and lighting and stuff at school events and plays
Mhm.
and stuff. And we kind of became really fast friends. But
Mhm.
they were a little bit younger than me. And when I was younger, I didn't have friends that were into fantasy.
Mhm.
I really only got into it about 13 and anyway myself, apart from like the Hobbit and stuff. It's really when I first started reading Eye of the World by Robert Jordan when I was about 13 that got me into it. And it's odd because it's the kind of thing that I should have got into, but I didn't. And then when my friends were into it, I was kind of like I felt at the time I was like, what is this? I remember watching in on one of the D&D sessions with one of my exes at the time, and I was so confused and lost. And I sat there thinking, you know what, this is exactly the kind of thing I should love, but I feel like I'm just too old for it. But now it's like the kind of thing that I wish I got into at the time, because now I would love to have that, to have a group. And it's difficult when it's my working patterns and not knowing many people. but eventually I'd like to get into that. But yeah, my friends were really into that stuff. They used to paint all like the miniatures and
Oh
things.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
That's a crazy thing. I am horrible at painting, but I still I bought just a couple of miniatures just to have them. Like I would never 40K is such an expensive hobby to get into, so
Yeah.
I would never do that just because I already have my vices with magic gathering. But
That's
yeah,
the other one they were into. Yeah.
yeah, that's another one where it'll drain your wallet, but it's so much fun. And yeah, anyway, I think where I was going with that is that 40K was kind of my introduction into grim dark, and it's been on my list for a while. They have a companion book series, which is it delves into a certain part of the lore called the Horus Heresy, and just there's I think a 10-book series or something close to that. I could be butchering it, but
yeah,
it has really good reviews. And I picked up the first one, and I've read the first couple of chapters, and I don't want to say that I'm going to DNF it, but I really wanted to get into it. I picked it up when I wasn't reading a lot, and so I kind of want to get back into that too. So I guess to answer the second part of your question, there's not really a part of modern fantasy that I'm really, mad about right now. I guess maybe just because I'm still trying to get my feelers out and really get a feel for it. Like I tell you, I'm not very well read, funnily enough. Yeah, it's bad, but I'm trying.
The same. Yeah, absolutely. It's trying to find that balance between, because I've got all these books that people always recommend, the same ones, Name of the Wind, you know what I mean?
People that put stuff on NetGalley too, those jerks, right?
Ruin my TBRs. Yeah, and so there's all that stuff that I want to read, but also I've very much got into the indie scene via my friends on Twitter and NetGalley, and also I'm very, very aware that often the books that everybody recommends are very white, very male, and I want to do better, but also I've still got so many of the classics to read, so it's a balance of trying to mix in some of the staples of the fantasy genre whilst trying some new, more diverse parts of the genre.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because then you could see kind of where it was and where it's going, and kind of just get an idea of both, like a nice little fantasy salad there, huh?
Yeah. Well, that's the only salad I'm gonna have, because I do not like salad.
I am there with you.
My problem is I'll have mixed leaves and stuff, right? That's fine because it's just a leaf, but I don't like any of the dressings to go with it, and I don't like cucumber. I hate it. I don't like anything like hummus. I don't like, so that's the problem. Yeah, it's bad. The only thing I'll eat is mixed leaves, but it's just plain, isn't it? So yeah. So I was gonna throw in some funny sort of random questions.
This is great.
Here we go. If one character could be the president from your books, who would be the president?
Okay. So I'm gonna way overthink this. Do you mean who would be the best being president, or who would most likely?
Well, I guess I was going for who would you want to be?
Who would I want to be president?
Who would you vote for?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Can I abstain? No. I'm gonna think this through. Gosh. I would say I feel like Oren is the most level-headed out of the bunch. Okay. Although, no, you know what? I'm going to say Lunaris, because he is the sovereign of wisdom. He would probably make some smart decisions.
It's true.
If we're talking about just main characters, because I wouldn't necessarily consider Lunaris a main character. I would say Oren, just because Tyrus is way too gullible, yada, and Serana is a little bit emotional at times. She can let her emotions get the best of her to, kind of get be quick to anger. Emil, just he wouldn't want the presidency. That's the kind of not him. And who else am I missing? Oh, Ares, just way too angry. And Leo is just way too young. So I would say Oren probably out of our main cast. But if we were going to the broader cast of characters, I would say Lunaris. He probably understands the role best, being a leader himself.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing. I guess you didn't expect that one.
No, did not.
I was trying to think of what interesting questions I could ask. I got another one for you. Prepare yourself for this one.
Okay, let's go.
If you were on a desert island and had to
Mhm.
eat one of your characters to survive, who would you choose to eat first?
It's got to be either Emil or Ares. They're the biggest. They would have the longest,
Not a
I
meal.
think,
Not a
right?
meal. No.
Not Emil. Okay, we'll say Ares. Ares is probably a little bit bigger anyway. Yeah, more nutrients. Although, God, that's horrible.
I nearly thought about asking who would be your. Have you seen Tom Hanks? Like Wilson, if you want a desert
Oh
island.
yeah, who would be my Wilson on the volleyball?
Yeah.
Probably Tyrus. He's the main character. I could talk to him
Yeah.
the most. Or no, you know what? Squall. No, definitely Squall.
Oh, I think
Definitely.
that's a good choice actually. I love school.
He would be the funniest. He would somehow still get drunk, even just being a volleyball. Yeah.
What song or piece of music would you compare your book to?
Oh, okay. So this is an interesting one because whenever I write, I actually listen to a playlist of different songs. So there's quite a few. Oh man. I really like, to be honest, you're not going to expect this one, but I really, really love Juice World, like a lot. And I just love like the lyrics in his music. So there's a song that I kind of like liken to Tyrus. It's called Righteous by him. And it's really interesting because it talks a lot about anxiety and just, sort of a lot of the stuff that Tyrus is going through. If we're talking about like just that represents the book as a whole, like lyrically, there is a song by Arrows to Athens. It's called Used to Be. And like in the song, they talk about, you just can't go back to what you used to be. And I feel like that represents the book well in terms of, it being, the winds of change and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I know that's a very wide net to cast because, you have hip hop and then kind of alternative rock on the other side. But that's sort of what I'm feeling when you're asking me that. I'm glad you did.
Yeah, you know what? I was not expecting like such a answer to be like almost ready.
Oh, I love music. I love music. There's a quote by a famous philosopher, and I forget who it is. Was it Nietzsche? I don't remember. But there was one where it said, without music, like I'm butchering this, by the way, but basically saying like without music, like life has no meaning. And like I really, really agree with that. And that is definitely not the quote. That is paraphrased. So anybody watching this, don't quote me saying that was what the
canceled.
Quote is. Yes, hashtag canceled. Yeah, it was something akin to that though, and it's really, really true. Like I feel like I couldn't have written those emotional scenes without listening to music because just getting into that headspace, into that kind of emotion, like you need something like that, whether it be watching something, reading something, or listening to something, just something that makes you feel.
Oh, absolutely. Like I know that I've read like when I've read like books where I know there's an emotional scene coming up or it's like a dramatic scene, I'll put the music on my Spotify because I know that it enhances my emotions and I want to feel those emotions. So I've got like a whole playlist of music that I use, and I pick different songs from it depending on the mood of the book. So yeah, I definitely see what you're saying there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've got another one for you.
All right. I'm liking these so far.
Where would you most like to go on holiday within your world, and who would be your tour guide, and who would be the dodgy backstreet scam artist, travel agent that sells you it?
Oh, okay. So where I would like to go, in the bottom right-hand corner of the Argan Empire, off of the I guess it's in East Empire, I believe, or it might even be below East Empire, but by the Golden Foothills there. I don't actually know if they're labeled on that version, but Costamere for sure. because of the wine that's produced there. There's a quote by Andromeda about the Costumere Red. That is the most expensive wine in all of the empire, and the vineyards there and the like kind of landscape there is much akin to Southern California. So while that is sort of like a bland, kind of like I'm going from California to California, like I would want to go to the beaches there. It's a very big vacationing spot. A lot of the wealthy elites kind of go there and vacation just because of the nice climate and stuff like that, or just anywhere on East Empire in general. They have the best beaches. I definitely wouldn't want to go up to Snowvale and freeze my butt off.
That's where I'd be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be in the mountains.
Mm-hmm. So I would go there for sure to Costumere just to try the wine there, and just relax. And as far as who my tour guide would be, Squall would be the most fun. But yep. I feel like he wouldn't know the Argon Empire as well, seeing as how he doesn't, stay in one spot very long. So I feel like possibly even Andromeda might be my tour guide there, just because she knows Costumere Red, like the wine. She would probably be a very frightening tour guide. So I would have to watch what I say, unless she, punch me or something. Like I built her up to be this kind of like, really domineering character, and but I feel like she would get me to where I wanted to go. I would never be late anywhere. And then the scammy person to sell it to me, I would say probably Laverna, okay. Since she's the I don't want to give spoilers out actually, so I'm going to stop there. Why?
Yeah.
Yes. I almost misspoke there. Yeah.
It took me a second. I was like, oh wait, that's he probably wants to stop talking now.
And I'll give you a little tidbit. This isn't necessarily a spoiler, but I didn't introduce her as a throwaway character. She does appear in the other novels.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I was going to ask briefly about where do you see the book series heading next? What have we got to look forward to? Is it gonna kind of stay the same, or does it grow sort of darker as we go with the characters? Is it going to become a chonker, or?
So this next one is definitely going to be longer. Just seeing as like I've made an outline for book 2. And I'm already going over the outline as far as like I'm through, I think 4 or 5 chapters now. And I think that outlined, I only had the first 2 chapters with this. So it might be quite a bit longer. It might not be. I'll just see how the tail end shapes up. But it's still going to be that adventure style. I wouldn't say necessarily it's that much darker. There are still the dark moments like we experienced in the first book. They are going to be a little sharper, I feel like, potentially, if that's possible. That might just be me thinking about it. Maybe it's not going to hit readers like that, but there are going to be a couple of moments of very, very sharp, like grimdark, we should say. And it's going to start with a bang. I'm going to just leave that there. It's going to start with a bang. And
can't wait.
Yes, and we're going to have some slice of life still. It's not going to be all dark and depressing, and we still will have our moments of levity and humor mixed in. But I feel like as the series progresses, there are going to be more, not necessarily dark moments, but more moments of conflict. I guess, the human heart in conflict with itself. So to speak. I know there was a lot of that in this book, but it's really going to get pushed up to 11. It's like we're driving the same car. We're just maybe, stomping down on the gas pedal a little bit more. That makes sense.
I am very, very excited because, I like how kind of, it's a really epic book, but it still kind of starts like quite small scale, kind of like almost like, well, it's like a quest fantasy almost. And it'll be interesting to see the characters and the story grow over the series until the epic conclusion, whenever that may be. Do you have any sort of things in mind that maybe you'd like to do afterwards that are kind of like ticking away in your brain, or?
Oh, yes. So there is a certain, I'm really glad you asked this. There is a certain area that I wanted to expressly have on the map, no matter what. And it's actually just to the lower left side of Snowvale. It's a place called Castle Drenlov.
I see, yeah.
Yes, and so I love vampires to death, And I'm just going to
Ooh.
say that. I'm not going to say that there are vampires in the story, but I am going to say that that is something that I want to maybe go into as a very, very early on prequel. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of years earlier when Argo was actually just expanding outward. And so, yes, I definitely want to go with that kind of story to kind of explain the origins of that castle and how it came about. And just there's a whole wide range of things that have happened that I'm kind of thinking about that are going to sort of be underneath the proverbial iceberg of just the main story being Seekers. And I
That's
also want to do some
exciting.
standalones. It was actually brought to my attention the other day. I had been thinking about it for a while, but this Twitter follower that I had, it was one of the people I gave out one of the physical arcs to. He was messaging me about it, and he was like, "Man, you should really do like a Squall like prequel novel." And I'm like, "Yeah,
Oh yes.
I
Oh
wanted to for a
yes.
while. I've been thinking about this for a while, I should say, about doing a Skrull prequel novel during the 300 Years' War, just to kind of give his perspective, maybe some of the things that he went through, like we kind of touch into his trauma a bit. It's not giving anything away because it's the first chapter, but,
Yeah.
we touch into him having a little bit of background and trauma in that. I really want to explore that. I think that would be fun. And, especially just his character, would be fun to just
That
kind
would
of
be
like, I guess,
amazing.
see like where he became Paul. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's another one. I also kind of want to do a backstory on Yada as well, how she became the Death
Oh
Crow
yes. Yeah.
and her trials and tribulations. There's a whole backstory on the Syndicate and how it was founded, what its purpose is within the Severian Empire. And there's a lot of other colorful members. It's almost like, I guess this is not a perfect example because I haven't seen it, but just from what I have seen of it, I know you're watching One Piece right now, and there's a colorful cast of, characters. There are pirates in there, right? In the same
Yeah.
vein, there is a colorful cast of assassins within the Syndicate. Yada is just one of many. She happens to be the best, the top assassin, but there are quite a few. And kind of learning about her growing up with all those different assassins and how she got some of her scars, both physically and mentally, would be kind of an interesting topic to explore that I really, really want to do too. So those are like the three things that I'm really thinking about, but I want to get through the main series first.
Yeah,
Who knows
absolutely.
how long that's going to take. But
Yeah,
yeah.
it sounds like you all got it planned out. Have you got like a world building document or anything like that?
I know, no, all in here.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
the thing. See, I'm good at I'm creative, so I can come up with like I guess like one sentence lines of what a story could be, but I would not even have the first clue how to start anything or plan any world out. You know what I mean? Like
It's
one day I'd
hard.
love to tell a story, and that's why I'm looking forward to telling it in audio drama because I'm sort of helping. I'm basically kind of uh, authoring the story, the plot of it, and the
Mhm.
character arcs. And then we've got another guy that's coming in and writing the dialogue for us. And that's really kind of a fun creative outlet because I'd love to be able to write something, but I'm just more kind of good at those. Oh well, what if this happened? What if? But not being able to flesh it out. You know what I mean? It's crazy. These authors kind of plan out thousands of years of history, and
I
how do you
know.
do that? And all the different kind of races and different types of money and all this stuff. I'm like, how do you even just come up with this stuff? Like,
Mhm. Yeah, it's a lot. So in my very humble experience of what I've done for my story, I do have somewhere a little black book, a little notebook that has a very rudimentary drawing of Tiarna in it with my horrible artistic
ooh,
expertise.
cool.
And it's funny that I really want to find it. I think if I do find it, I'll send it to you. I might even post it. The actual kingdoms and empires and stuff, they were in different spots
Ah,
in Tiarna. There were different names.
wow.
There were way fewer cities because obviously it hadn't fleshed out yet.
Yeah.
That's when I first came up with the idea of the oligarchy of the Argan sovereigns and the 10 that did control the different aspects of the government. And,
Mhm.
almost just like big, like branches, maybe not unlike, the federal government where they have, the branch of this, the branch of that and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Just having that being led by just these like literally larger than life, like people with these weird animal face, helmets. It just, I don't know, it really jived with me. So that's kind of where I started with that. I wrote down, the names of the sovereigns, what they did. Originally, there was an emperor, but then I thought, I'm like, why does there need to be an emperor? Like, the sovereigns themselves are so interesting. The emperor would kind of just be there, almost like a figurehead. So I cut the emperor of Arga out of the story entirely, because I thought the sovereigns themselves are just interesting enough, and kind of made Aquilon, the head sovereign, the one that does all the government stuff, but technically not any more authority than the rest. He just is the one that actually deals it out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. Wow. Yeah. It's an exciting process making a book. How does it feel to kind of have it out in the world? Nearly out in the world.
It still kind of doesn't feel real, if I'm being honest with you. I feel like, I don't know, I'm just always anxious. I'm always like, oh, is it good? So I did want to bring this up because it's just really interesting and kind of terrifying. When I got my interior design done on my book, it was a horribly grueling process, because I initially got it done. And one thing that I really wanted to make sure was done correctly was the map. And my initial interior designer had recommended me to go with a setting called No Bleed on my interior. He gave me a beautiful interior design, and that's actually what you read on NetGalley initially. And before I sent you the arc, the digital arc on NetGalley is with his original design, and I loved it. And there was nothing wrong with his design, but what we kind of didn't mutually understand was that I wanted the map to encompass on the print version the entire page. And with the No Bleed setting, this is a note to all you authors out there. If you are doing KDP or you're getting any interior design, if you would like to have your map take up the entire page, make sure that it is formatted with bleed. What that basically means is that, so my map was cut here and a cut here, and then the margins of the page in between. So it was just cut in half and very small. And also what I found that once we blew it up, once I actually did get it with No Bleed, once we blew it up, the first map was just far too detailed, that all of the little details that were, I had the map hand drawn. So all the little details were just sort of lost. They were too pixelated.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the Amazon printers are only, they can only print so small. So I had to get the map redrawn, and that's what is in your physical arc right there, the map redrawn. But in terms of the interior design, I went to a new interior designer to get it formatted with bleed. And when he transferred everything over, what he sent back to me, and bless his heart, I think he is either outside the US, or whatever program he was using was outside the US, because it formatted it thinking with a different language in mind. That was apparent. Oh. And so thousands of words were changed, thousands and thousands.
Oh, gosh.
Yes. So I had to read through it and basically read it against the old version. And I did this 3 times. I went through 3 times, going through everything, getting all of the edits out and sending that in. And he would fix it, he had no qualms. He felt really bad that had happened. So he would fix it and get everything back to me. But that was a long, long process. I read it so many times, Matthew, so many times, just to get everything out. And my one fear is that there still are, some ones that I didn't find in there. But I mean, we'll see what the other people with the arc say, if they can find anything in there. I've been through it, but that was like a horror story.
Yeah.